Hello and welcome back to the One Take Show podcast, the second season. It's been quite some time now since I've uploaded my past videos, and it's because of a persistent issue with my YouTube channel. Also, because of the final year in law school, it gets a little hectic. But I'm really excited to start off the second season with this amazing episode. I am in conversation with Mr. Ravi Kangal. Sir is a beloved senior, and he's also an associate with Shardo Ramalchand Mangal Das in the competition law team. So naturally, we talk about everything that there is to talk about in competition law, and I'm sure this episode is going to benefit a lot of the law students. So if you like this video, press the like button, share this video with your friends, and subscribe to the channel. And ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, let's start with the podcast.
You want something, go get it. Period.
All right, we're recording. Hello, so welcome to the One Take Show. I am really honored, very excited to have this conversation with you. I think everyone in our university at RML really loves you. We really look up to you, and there is so much that we want to learn from you. And I've been getting this constant request to get you on the podcast to speak about competition law, to speak about your experience. So I'm really grateful for this opportunity. Thank you so much for sparing your Sunday, and thank you so much for sitting down with me.
Thank you so much for having me, Kaustubh. I mean, it's quite surprising though, whatever you've just mentioned. But okay, it's good, yeah. I mean, love to be of help to people, like to juniors mostly, yeah.
Absolutely, sir. I think one very interesting factor that we, as especially the senior students in our college right now, fourth, fifth years, have realized is that it's very difficult to find your niche in, especially in top tier law firms, and to identify what area of law that you want to work with, identify what team that you want to work with, and to have that very clear, crystal idea as to how to maneuver through the industry. And there's a lot of examples, but sure, like some that we relate to very closely, we would love to learn from them. So if you could please tell me about your experience in law school, and then what sort of inspired you to take the path that you took, and how did it sort of turn out for you?
So honestly, my law school life, I mean, it had its goods, the bads, and things that I don't remember anymore, which is like for all the law students across the country, I would say. So one thing that I which I thought that I will always be mindful of was to try my hands at everything. So I'll tell you, I mean, you would know the process. Like in your first year, there are different committees who would invite you for interviews, and they'll ask you to create those CVs and everything. So right out of school, I had like a half a page of CV, and in terms of my co-curriculars, I had like debating and I think some random sport, because that was the most generic options that I could think of. So I did not want the same story to be played out in my college as well. So I just thought that maybe this time this is not going to happen. When I step out, I will have a lot of things to sort of put in my CV. So I mean, it shouldn't be like a half a page of CV. It needs to cover at least 3/4 of a page. So yeah, so that sort of made me realize that yeah, maybe I should try my hands in different things. I started with debating, then I shifted to mooting. I worked on a couple of research articles. I joined the cultural committee. I was selling those logical reasoning questions to coaching institutes for $50 a pop at one point, and then I was teaching law CLAT aspirants as well for a very brief period. So I couldn't try negotiation competitions, but I mean that's the only thing that I couldn't try. But otherwise, I think yeah. The good part is, as an offshoot of all this, I got to learn about competition law. So my first, uh, what do you call it? The first time that I came across this area of practice was when I participated in one of the GIs. It was, I think, the one winter grand intra, and the problem was based on Section 4, basically AOD case, and it was largely focused on the DLF matters which were ongoing at the moment. So yeah, that's how I started reading up on the topic. Yeah, then so I remember we did BR Sani. This is this moot which is organized by Nalsar. So thankfully, the edition that I participated in, while they focus on constitutional issues, there's always an peripheral theme as well. So luckily, in that edition, it was competition law. Basically, it was the tussle between high courts and the tribunals in question were the CCA and the compact. So that is how I also got to know like the constitutional aspect of the act, and how it is framed, and what was the mindset of the legislators at the time. How did they go about it? So all in all, to a great extent, I would say the fact that I participated in different things, that is what helped me in identifying, this area of practice as something which I can stick to for a long period of time. Uh, so yeah, another thing that I realized was that if you really need to understand a topic in depth, you need to, write a research article. It's as simple as that. So after these moods, I realized that if I'm really interested, then maybe one way to sort of understand if it really piques my interest or not is to probably draft something of my own. So I picked up one of the issues that we had debated. Mooted in one of the in the winter granite, and just wrote a paper on it. And I would say that is when I really got hooked. So uh, yeah, that, and then okay, yeah, another important thing. Important in the hindsight. At the time, it just seemed like it's something that one should have done logically speaking, which was to intern with a law firm which focuses on competition law. So all in all, yeah, that is how I entered this. Competition law.
Perfect. Right, sir. And I think in our university, one of the major factors is that you obviously, we as law students in our university, we see you as an authority in competition law. Every time a moot comes up, I remember it was an NLU Jodhpur moot, antitrust, and we contacted you for getting some guidance about it. But what is really curious, as I've observed, is that although competition law has become very popular, it has become rather mainstream, where major teams, big law firms, and not just in one or couple of places, but everywhere are working on this. There's still some apprehension, some lack of awareness, or some lack of familiarity with this subject. And the reason why I know this is because a lot of people have texted me and have asked me to specifically target an episode on competition law. So if I were to ask you, how would you conceptually sort of explain what competition law as a legal practice is? And in an overview, how would you define this legal practice?
Okay, so firstly, a rider. I am not an authority on the topic.
No, for us, you are. For us, you are. We've been taking you as an
honestly,
authority.
honestly, given our profession, nobody really can be an authority. I mean, especially in their initial years into the profession. So, uh, yeah, keeping this rider in mind. Uh, so competition law. The good thing is it's you can sort of classify it into different buckets in terms of the area of practice. Actually, you know what, taking a step back, let's just talk about why people are still not aware of the topic. That's probably because it's not still taught as such. It's not a part of a curriculum in law schools. I still remember it was just a unit in our corporate law, the course. It was taught over a span of, I think, 3 or 4 lectures, and that's pretty much it. Uh, and to be honest, that doesn't cover it. I mean, people should realize that before competition law, you also had the MRTP Act, which India sort of had this structure in place. Obviously, MRTP was way, way, way behind what more advanced jurisdictions were doing at the time. So thankfully, we got the Competition Act in place. I wouldn't say that it is a very well worded legislation, which clearly has been realized by the legislature as well, because now you have the CLRC report and there's an amendment in the pipeline. So yeah, that's one. Now moving on to what it comprises now. I mean, now that we've covered as to why people don't know about it, what it comprises now is, broadly it can be classified into enforcement and transaction, as in merger control transactions. So enforcement covers your section 3, section 4, a lot of compliance work and advisory related work. And merger control is your 5 and 6, and all the M&A activity which needs to be filtered and needs to be notified to the CCI. See, honestly, merger control, you will see a lot more of it as compared to enforcement. That's simply because India is brimming with M&A activity at the moment. There's just a lot which is going on, and most of the transactions trigger the thresholds which are there under Section 5, which leads to the whole process before the CCI. Now the point is that even when I was in law school and I was trying to understand and sort of dig deeper into the topic, I had no idea what merger control really was, because it's a it's a very different practice. It's a practice in its, it's not something that you generally come across. uh, it's not you know a typical transactional practice. You're not drafting contracts, you're not drafting agreements, it's not enforcement, you're not really arguing before a court of law. It's more like a pleading. It's a document that you draft, which you submit to the CCI. It's a lot, entails a lot of information collection. So that's, it has a lot of practical aspect to it, so you can't really expect students to sort of understand what all goes into this area of practice while they are in law school. So yeah, that's merger control for you. It's quite interesting. I would say that uh, a lot of law firms thrive with it. uh, which makes sense, because if you have a thriving M&A practice, then obviously you can always leverage that position to sort of gain clients for your merger control practice as well. Which is what you're saying, which is what you're seeing right now with a lot of law firms who have come up with their own sort of competition practice. So that's merger control. Then when you talk about enforcement, uh, see, it's no secret that litigation in this country takes a lot of time. So that way, if you're enforcement is the interesting bit. People do like merger control, but enforcement is really where you apply yourself, because uh, given the kind of what do you call it, the way the sections are worded and the kind of scenarios that it covers, it takes a lot of thinking to sort of figure out how to make a case. Also because it has a lot of economics. So, and the best part is that the theories of harm and the economics which goes into competition law, it's the same across the globe. So you may not have an answer in India, but you'll sure as hell have an answer maybe in the European Union or maybe in the US. uh, so that way it becomes really interesting and engaging for the practitioners as well as law students, I would say. uh, so yeah, now when you talk about enforcement, it's understand is that not it's not like every day that you appear before a CCI or the NCLAT or Supreme Court, or you're challenging the CCI in a writ before a high court. It doesn't happen every day, but it does happen quite often. But for you to make it happen quite often, you need to be in the kind of law firms which are trusted by the industry. uh, so that sort of drives your practice, that sort of provides you with the exposure that you should get in your initial years to be able to uh, not make it big, but sort of be the kind of person who can be approached by clients in the future, and be the sort of person who can sort of provide them with the guidance and the advice that they expect from you. uh, which is why joining a good law firm which has a established practice makes a lot of sense. uh, it's simply because the kind of, to give you an example, the kind of issues that you face while appearing for or against Google are not the kind of issues that you will come across in uh, a relatively smaller company. uh, uh, Related to this, given that now there's like a lot of focus on tech and how the tech giants need to be sort of uh, looked at through the lens of antitrust, it becomes important for you to be in that be in that space, for you to appreciate the kind of issues which are being dealt with across the globe. uh, because there's a reason why each regulator across the globe is debating whether their current legislation is fit to sort of tame these tech giants or not. So to be able to appreciate those discussions, you need to understand how these tech giants work. And to be able to understand how they work, you need to either work for them or work against them at some point. So yeah, that's then okay, so this is your general enforcement. Another part of enforcement is compliance. Now compliance basically is you have companies will have an inbuilt competition or compliance mechanism. Basically they'll have seminars, regular seminars. They'll distribute handouts sort of explaining to their employees as to what competition laws are, and what all you need to be mindful of on a day-to-day basis. To give you an example, it's mostly the customer-facing executives, like the people who are out who meet the distributors, suppliers, the customers, who are more prone to breaching competition law on a day-to-day basis, simply because they have that exposure to their counterparts from the other, from their competitors as well. So even the minutest of details which they share with their counterparts, which may be commercially sensitive, may invite, antitrust liability on the company as well as their, KMPs. So a lot of companies are very sensitive to it now. In fact, this is also a mitigating factor which is considered by the CCI, if you have a compliance program in place. So that becomes another, source of, what do you call it, generating revenue for law firms, because the bigger the company, the more they are focused on sensitizing their employees, about competition law. And to be fair with you, a lot of companies don't yet know, what competition law is, as in companies, as in employees, because they're not really concerned with it. You'll have the legal department, which will be well versed with it. They will know everything in and out. But then you'll also have people who have zilch idea as to what competition law is, in which case it becomes uh, really important for the companies to let the employees know what they can and cannot do. So that's pretty much it. Broadly, it's enforcement and merger control. Within enforcement, you'll have the litigation bit, and then you'll have compliance. Another bucket, if I were to consider, would be advisory, which would include both merger control and enforcement. Advisory essentially is advising clients. So if, let's say, they are considering whether a transaction needs to be notified or not, they will approach you. Then you need to sort of if any of the exemptions are applicable to the transaction or not. So the Competition Act has a bunch of exemptions which you can use even if your transaction meets the thresholds under Section 5. Uh, so, but then that involves like a lot of analysis and again reviewing a lot of minor details. So that becomes a practice in itself, like a substantial portion of the practice in itself. Then unlike a lot of jurisdictions, India does not have a provision whereby you can approach the CCI and check with them if any commercial activity that you're willing to undertake, is that anti-competitive. So that's sort of left for the customer, as in the clients, to figure out if what I'm doing is okay or not. So naturally, they need some guidance, and which is why they approach law firms. So that again becomes a sub part of enforcement in terms of advising
Right.
people what they're doing makes sense or not, and if there's any risk involved in it or not.
Makes sense.
So
Mhm. This is very, very fascinating, sir. Yeah. No, no,
yeah,
please,
I
please
mean,
complete.
the point is that a lot of this doesn't come to the fore when you're in
Mhm.
law school. None of this is being discussed, and I mean, this actually has a lot of practical aspect to it, and therefore, I mean, I'm not sure how would one discuss it in law school also. Right? Ideally, something should be done, on that front, but I'm not yet sure how it would be done or it can be done.
Right, sir. So this is very fascinating. As you said, like obviously law schools don't really necessarily talk about these industry specific information and the knowledge, because obviously the limited exposure that we have to competition law, except the limited curriculum that we have, is the moots that we do. And moots also only expose us to, let's say, a very specific sector of competition law, specific
Right.
application of competition law. For example, if it is digital market, then the digital economy and the antitrust issues involved. But what I'm really curious to know is there are two things that has come out of it. One is that what I've realized is, as you suggested, that the legal practice of competition law either needs to be an either or practice where you have to only stick with mergers or, let's say, advisory work, or you can do mergers advisory as well as enforcement work. And the other is that when it comes to the legal practice, there is a third option available apart from the litigation chambers, law firms, is that can there be an in-house teams which can be dedicated just to antitrust issues for the larger tech companies and all that. So I would love to know your opinion in that sphere.
Okay, so firstly, just a correction. It's not an either or practice. I mean, at least in India, you'd still. I mean, most of the competition law practices, they delve into both merger control and enforcement. You'd find this trend outside though, in more advanced jurisdictions where you'll have individuals who are either focusing on antitrust or merger control. But in India, that's still, I mean, you don't come across a lot many practices which have such individuals. So yeah, most of the law firms and most of the practitioners are sort of delving into both the aspects. Now, in terms of in-house, see, the point is having an in-house counsel which is dedicated to practicing competition law will require resources to be attributed to such an individual, right? Generally, an in-house counsel, I mean, again, this is a very preliminary assessment of mine, so can be inaccurate. But basically, what I understand is that in-house counsel have to deal with a lot of issues, and it's I mean, because each whatever the company is doing, you'll have sector-specific laws that they'll be dealing with. You'll have commercial laws which will be applicable to the company, so they have to deal with a lot of things. In such a scenario, having a dedicated competition council may not be feasible, especially in India, given that you don't have so much litigation which is going on, wherein you need that one person who has all the know-how of the topic. That said, you'd see companies like Google or Facebook having dedicated competition law council would be guiding and advising them, which is simply because they are facing litigation across the globe. Uh, so they need to have that to be like consistent in their approach across regulators, and to be consistent in their pleadings and what they're submitting. They need to have someone who has a grip over the topic, so that this one person can talk to different law firms or representing the client and sort of manage some consistency. So therefore you'll see like larger companies having competition counsel, but traditional companies who are into traditional markets and companies in general in India don't really have a dedicated competition counsel. Yeah, so that may not be the best option for you if you're really interested in this area of practice.
Right, right.
Yeah, also one more aspect. I mean, see, the whole point of competition law is that you sort of need to be, you have to, inject yourself into the product that you're dealing with. I mean, that's the whole point. If so for that, it'll be beneficial for you, at least in your initial years, to sort of get a sense of all the industries which are out there. So the more like the diversified client base that you work for, the more knowledge you will gain of different products which are there, and that, trust me, becomes really useful, because there's this whole issue of defining the relevant market, and sort of delving into what are the substitutable products. So from that aspect, it becomes helpful to understand how do you how the market, the industry sees a product, how the supplier sees it, and how do if you were to argue, is it feasible for you to argue whether product A and B can be substitutable or not. So that way it makes sense to sort of first you know deal with different products rather than stick yourself to just one, which is what will happen if you're an in-house counsel. So
Right. So I think a major part of this legal training when it comes to competition law is to also have commercial awareness, is to have that industry specific knowledge of how the things function beyond just legal understanding of how the regulatory aspect of it would turn out. So one way, yeah, right, sir.
no, go ahead.
So I think one important factor which comes into this big question for any law student to consider is that how can they actually go about that training. So one very attractive feature is that we join teams in top tier law firms, let's say tier 1, tier 2 law firms. And I think one benefit which I can sort of foresee is that these law firms, as you mentioned, have an established competition law practice, which means they have huge matters, some very nuanced matters where you have to work on nuanced aspects of every competition law issue. So is that the appropriate way out to join the largest teams, largest possible law firms, and to work with their competition teams? Or is it advisable to join a smaller team, or let's say boutique law firm, so you can get perhaps a larger exposure as compared to the larger law firms?
See, at the time when I graduated, the former made a lot more sense, but now things have really picked up. Uh, you'll see most of the law firms which have a thriving competition law practice have like a bunch of clients which provide their team members with adequate exposure. So if you really need to make an inroad into the this area of practice now, at least you shouldn't be boggled down by whether I'm going to a tier one or a tier two or a boutique law firm. Just make sure that whomsoever you're joining, just read up on the law firm. You'd see if they have matters going on for them or not. So long as they have matters going on for them, they will be able to provide you with the kind of exposure which is necessary in your initial years. I think you're good to go. Yeah. So
Right.
wherever you see
Mhm.
wherever you see a law firm which sort of has a decent client base and are diversifying, I think that's it. Because you'll see a lot of
Mhm.
boutique law firms, the ones who will actually be filing the information, so they'll be representing the informants. Uh, Even in cases where Amazon and Flipkart are before the CCI, uh, it's a local dealers association which filed the information. So basically, which were represented by independent counsel or small law firms. So that way, it's not necessary that you have to go to a tier one, but then what's important is that you sort of read up on the law firm or the practitioner whom you wish to join, and sort of see that they have something going on for them. It's not a hit and trial. It shouldn't be, especially when you're graduating. So I
Right.
think that's the filter that you need to use.
Mhm. Right, sir. And for like, let's say, litigation chambers or individual practitioners, does competition law become a viable option for them as well, or is it like I understand your point for the aspect of informants, like you've suggested that even small boutique law firms can also serve the purpose of advising informants. But for individual practitioners, or let's say chambers who are primarily litigation chambers, can competition law also serve as a good or viable option for them as well?
See, again, this is based on my limited interaction and whatever I've observed so far, but I would say that focusing only on competition law as an independent practitioner may not be the most viable option, for the simple reason that you're losing out on 50% of the work anyway, which is your merger control. So it's that's, like I said, that runs along with your M&A practice. So if and as an independent practitioner, you will not have the resources to sort of have that going on for you. So that's a red flag right there. Then, like I said, there is enforcement. I mean, on a regular basis in this country, but it is not as frequent that you can set up your own law offices and be focused on it. Uh, Plus, uh, I mean, you will find uh, counsel who do argue competition law cases, but they need to be briefed by law firms. So that way, it doesn't seem to be a very viable option, and you'll not see counsel who only be doing competition law matters, because there aren't so many. There, I mean, there are, but again, there aren't so many. So that way, I don't think so. It is feasible at this stage, but maybe in the future, with more business coming India's way and more companies entering India, you will see a lot of antitrust tussle. But till then, I think it may not be the best option if one wishes to sort of step out.
Right, sir. And how do you see how do you assess the opportunities available with, let's say, the think tanks, or let's say the CCI, the academic research that CCI carries out on multiple occasions, or any other such various in-house teams? We've already spoken about in-house though, but other such opportunities where competition law can become an area of exploration for law students. Do you see opportunities bubbling there as well?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, CCI regularly hires research assistants, and I mean, there's a pro right there, right? You get to work firsthand with the regulator and sort of uh, have an insight into everything which is going on. So if, let's say, you're staffed on a Google matter or you're staffed on a Flipkart matter, then you have that first-hand experience of how to go about things. So that information comes in handy. That experience comes in handy when you decide to change sides, because then people sort of expect you, and rightly so, to know how CCI would be viewing a given set of facts. So that way it becomes really helpful. Think tanks, I mean, India has the consumer centric think tanks which are also focusing on competition law. So that way I think that's also a good option. uh, See, if you really, you need to distill all of this into what you really need to do and the kind of work profile that you need to have once you graduate. uh, if you see yourself as someone who will not be satisfied unless you know sort of had you sort of uh, have that practical uh, uh, what do you call it, let me rephrase this. If you are a guy who or a girl, if who's who wouldn't be satisfied unless they put themselves right into the crosshair, I mean, you know, they sort of want to be in the midst of everything, then maybe law firm practice is for you. uh, but if you have an academic bent, if what you really, I mean, you love the subject, but then you don't really have a knack for being in the middle of things, and obviously you can stick to a think tank or you know, maybe academics. Uh, but I mean, let me clarify. This is not a relative assessment. I mean, each profession in itself has its own uh, what do you call it, benefits and problems. And ideally, one should really understand what they expect out of their professional life. And the once I mean once you have that sorted, then it becomes I mean, it's a redundant comparison to compare a law firm associate with someone who's into academics, because you did not want to be a law firm associate in the first place. So that's something that one should sort of first understand and then approach uh, this question.
Right, right. So, is there also jurisdictional advantage for anyone entering this area of practice? Is it like all those metropolitan cities or larger jurisdictions which have access to, let's say, NCLAT, NCLTs, and all of that, have a more thriving practice as compared to other cities? For example, Lucknow, which does not have an NCLT or NCLAT. So, is there a jurisdictional advantage here as well?
See, what needs to be kept in mind is that it's a regulatory practice. So you need to have that you know, repo with the regulator and the people who are working with the regulator. Repo in the sense, you need to have that level, you know, some amount of face time. You need to have that level of understanding, because you sort of have to interact with them on a day-to-day basis. You'll be making pleadings, you'll be submitting documents, you will be checking with them on what the status of the case is, you know. So there are different aspects to it. So that way it becomes important if you know, you are in the same city as the regulator. uh, Another aspect to this is you need to also have a sufficient amount of face time with your clients. So therefore you need to also be in the city in which most of your clients are based. So the obvious options then become Delhi and Bombay. Bombay has a huge, you know, client base. Delhi has an equally big client base. The added advantage obviously is that NCLAT and CCI are both based in Delhi, so you sort of have that face time in you know, in terms of meeting with the officers working in the CCI or the DG office. So yeah, the obvious answers are Bombay and Delhi, but obviously Delhi has a advantage in terms of the fact that the regulator is also situated in Delhi. But as you'll see, I mean, if you're following the trends, you'll see that uh, more often than not, CCI orders, whenever challenged in writ, are actually being challenged across the high courts in the country and not just the Delhi High Court. But that's more of a legal issue than a, you know, a factual issue, because you there's no I mean, it's a, high courts have jurisdiction across the country to sort of uh, uh, you know, address challenges to CCI's jurisdiction. You need to obviously establish territorial jurisdiction, but all of this is like too legal. To answer your question, yeah, it's Bombay and Delhi, I would say, for now, unless
Yeah.
CCI chooses to put up with its regional offices.
Right, sir. So, with this, I would like to make this conversation a little more selfish about the law students. For all the law students who are sort of trying to enter this industry and not just explore it, but also single mindedly pursue a career in competition law. There are two aspects to this question. One is, how can they prepare in the law school, not just to have an in depth understanding of competition law, but what is it that they should read, study, work on Number one, how can they develop their sort of commercial awareness, industry specific understanding to some extent, in order to be useful to the teams that they're going to work for. And finally, when they start interning, what is it that they can do that can help them to stand out or possibly find a niche in their teams, and then further create a career in this area of law.
So on point number one, I think the most beneficial exercise that a law student can undertake is to write an article. I mean, the more you write, the more you read, and that's the best way to approach any area of practice. It gives you the relevant level of insight which is expected from a law student who sort of see. The point is, you're off when you tell your prospective employer that I have a knack for competition, I'm really interested in the topic, then you need to also express and sort of provide evidence as to how interested you are, because that's the special consideration that you've offered to your employer, right? That I'm really interested because I'm a competition law enthusiast, and this is all that I want to do. So the moment you give them this special consideration, you also need to give them something to work with. So the more papers you have on your CV, more moots that you've done in this area of practice, it becomes helpful, obviously. Personally, I feel papers over moot are, do a lot more benefit to you. So I think that should be the way to approach it while you are in your law school. Then see, again, the moment you apply for an internship, it's you are offering a special consideration, which is I'm really interested in this topic. So then that way, once you join, they your team will sort of have an expectation from you to at least know the basics. No law firm expects you to know everything in and out because you're still a law student. But what they do expect out of you is commitment. How inclined you are to sort of work shoulder to shoulder with them, and how easily can you instill some level of comfort in them that you are around and you are what do you call it, you're someone on whom they can depend even though you are just an intern. So that's all really what's expected out of you. uh, so yeah, I mean, so long as you know the Competition Act in and out, you know what regulations apply, you have a handle on some of the cases, some of, as in the most notable cases which are there. What's going on in the competition law space at the moment? What are the major litigation, the cases which are going on? I think that should be fine. Then in terms of what to do once you are in a law firm as an intern, I think it's the expectations the same as any team has, which I just mentioned, that you need to express that you have that level of commitment that they can rely on you. You're really interested, and you are willing to put in that extra bit which is required from you. uh, See, unless you give them something to sort of uh, have that sense of comfort that they can rely on you, it becomes very difficult for them to see if you could in the long run be a good option or not. And I mean, to be honest, this is not, I mean, this was something which was also explained to me by a senior, and this has come in handy for me, I mean, throughout. So
Right.
I mean, all you need to I mean, because people have approached me and asked me how do I build that connect with the person that I'm working with. Let's say if you're working with an associate or a senior associate, the point really is that you need to give them that comfort that if there's something, look, I am around, and you give me something, I will ensure that it gets done. So the so long as you're able to build that level of comfort, I think you're good to go. Obviously, not discounting that there are a lot of other factors which are not within your control. Your timing of applying, who all are interning alongside you, who do you get staffed with? If there's a lot of if there are a lot of matters going on at the moment or not. So these are the things that you can't really control. But in terms of what you can control, it's to have like a very open mindset, and yeah, just be able to build that level of comfort. And to be able to do that, you go back to option one, which is you need to read up sufficiently so that you sort of uh, give people that confidence that, look, yeah, I have special interest in this topic, and therefore I know the basics. And if not the basics, I know at least as much as someone who's specially interested in this topic should know, uh, as a law student. So yeah, I think that's pretty much it.
Wonderful, sir. I think that last segment of this conversation could in itself be an episode where I could just get into that rabbit hole and never come out. Keep talking about how can we sort of become because now with everyone reaching, at least I am sort of reaching the end of my college life. We are all thinking about this. How can we become more and more useful? How can we find that sweet spot of finding that requirement in the teams and becoming sort of useful, becoming required. And definitely this advice helps a lot, and I'm sure this episode is going to help each and every law student who's been asking me to get an episode on competition law. All my batchmates, all my college mates for that matter, who've been asking for your specific episode. I'm sure this particular episode is going to make a lot of people happy. So thank you so much for joining me, sir. And before we wrap this up, do you have any closing remarks for this episode?
I think, not really. I mean, भाई मतलब ऑफ द रिकॉर्ड क्या
नहीं सर, कुछ भी कह दो आप जो से आपको सही लगे। और क्या बच्चों खुश रहो, इंटर्नशिप करो, नौकरी वोकरी पा जाओ और क्या सर।
हाँ यार, मतलब बेस्ट ऑफ लक, डू वेल और क्या।
Perfect.
I can be philosophical that things will fall into place.
Sure. Yes, that
पागल है क्या ये सब
sir,
बोलते हैं?
please do. वो preachiness में तो पूरा legal
नहीं यार, I
profession
think-
based है sir. Isn't my entire podcast
नहीं,
that
but
only?
honestly, नहीं, dude. I mean, to your viewers, I would say that, just calm down. I mean, take each day as it comes.
Okay.
I think things
Right, sir.
fall into place sooner than later. It may not seem so at this stage.
Mhm.
It did not its way to me back then. But trust me, eventually it does. If it's any if it's helpful in any way, I just had one tier 1 internship, and that was my only shot at joining a competition law practice. So if things have to happen, they happen. So you just need to keep trying. I think that's pretty much it.
Fair. Perfect. That is one example I'm going to play with now. I'm going to hope that this works out in my personal life as well. But nonetheless, thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much for joining me for this episode. Thank you so much for taking time out. And thank you so much for this wonderful conversation. Thank you.
No worries, sir. Thank you so much for having me once again.